I'd like to welcome Corine Carey. She was born and raised in Ioco and the Anmore area, and Corine has some stories to tell us about her family and growing up in the Port Moody area.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So, tell me about Port Moody as you remember it.
That's all I've really known. So I was born in 1979, and from that point on, we lived in the Ioco town site, well, the outskirts of it. I remember my entire family, my dad's family, my mom's family, they were born and raised in Port Moody as well. So I grew up hearing stories of the high school and them going to school and all the families, and my dad down at what they used to call, well, today it's Rocky Point, and they used to call it Pigeon Park, and the stories of the pool, and everything about Ioco and Port Moody was just home to me growing up.
Oh,
so,
that's great.
Yeah, I remember lots.
So tell me some of the stories you've heard.
So some of the ones that stand out for me were of my dad growing up, and how playing at Rocky Point, Pigeon Park, there were actually hunters that would still hunt pigeons down there. So it was like you'd be running through and hopefully not get shot if you were skipping school, I guess. And then my mom saying the same stories, but going into the local pool, which was a saltwater pool. So they had this big pool that when the tide came in would fill up with salt water, and everyone would run down, but it was full of like oils and stuff from the refinery mills and gross stuff, and every kid was in it. And it was apparently not uncommon for them to all come out with rashes on their skin, and God only knows what was in that water. So Rocky Point's definitely improved over the years. But those were the ones as a kid that kind of scarred me, like, oh, Rocky Point, ooh, swimming in the inlet, ooh. So those were two that stand out for sure.
Do you remember when the wharf was built out there, or was there a wharf at the time that they had?
There was no wharf when my parents were growing up. When I think I was about 6 or 7, I think it was expanded out,
okay.
And they started to make it a little bit prettier, and we'd come down and walk from Old Orchard around and see it. Yeah.
So some people have told me there are a number of houses around the area as well.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of those old homes?
Not so much the old homes. I remember my dad pointing out the locations of where some used to be and the names, but I don't remember who they were at that point. Yeah.
So tell me about your house here in Port Moody.
Yeah, so we've always known it as the little house because it was really little. It was actually the water taxi station in the 1920s. So when you look at the house, you'll see the photo of where the little ticket window used to be, and they would walk down to the water and be shuttled from, I guess it was like North Van to the Ioco terminal. So in the 1940s, apparently my uncle's mother bought it. Her name was Dorothy Turbot. She lived in the Ioco town site. They bought it, and then it was my aunt and her husband lived in it, and then my uncle lived in it, and it was passed on through the family clan, and we ended up living in it. And when I was born, they converted the one bedroom into my room, and then the living room became my parents' bedroom, and they had to do some expansion to it. So it's a little bit of an expansion. And 3 kids later, so 3 of us, we all shared one room. We decided it was time, well, I didn't, my parents decided it was time to move to Anmore. So we left that house in 1985, I believe. So we moved up the hill.
And that was located in Ioco itself?
It was right on Ioco, where the current church is.
Yes.
We were 2 houses down today.
Yeah.
And there's 3 bigger homes there currently. And our house backed out right over what we call the gully, which is a big cliff, and the raccoons would be there. And yeah, it was lots of rodents in that area.
So what are your memories of Ioco town site itself?
It was our backyard because we were so close to it. We would just walk to what was the bowling green that we would look. As a kid, it was always exciting to walk around the perimeter and like hang on to the old bars and run across the field and play in all the big leaves. And in the fall, my dad would rake all the big piles of the huge maple leaves, and we'd jump in them and then run over the bridge to Denny's store. Oh yeah, that was our backyard to play in.
Denny's store. Now
Denny's
that would be the groceteria, I would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. And what do you remember about the groceteria and Denny and Evelyn?
I remember mincemeat pies, root beer popsicles, and his fancy leather chair in the back office.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I remember we were there almost daily. It was like, I think my mom's sanity to get us down to the house to walk the 3 kids down to the store. But I remember Evelyn she always had a smile on her face, and she had a really cool stool behind the counter, and she let us sometimes come in and pretend we were ringing it in for us or with us. Denny was always at the back. He had the huge deli, And he had tons of meat. He was famous for his mincemeat pies. He had the coolest old, like, 1950s leather chairs in his little back office that overlooked the back garden that he had with his picnic tables. And he always would have little lollipops for us, or candies and treats. So that was always memorable, because we would always be the first ones there to get a little treat. In the summer, it was always the root beer popsicles. As soon as you walked in, on the left was a huge big freezer. And if they had none left, they'd sneak us in the back and go to the bigger freezer and get the good ones. So, yeah, no, they were amazing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
They also had a garden, I understand?
They had a huge garden. Denny never married, but he lived with his mother above the store.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what his mother's name was. She never was running the store, so we never really saw her. But she and Denny had a beautiful garden out the back. And it was huge. There was like fruit trees. They had picnic tables. It was just huge.
Yeah.
And that's where you'd kind of be able to hang out and have your popsicle.
Well, gardening in those days was a pastime that everybody
Yeah.
had.
And I think his mom just loved the fact that it was such a big back area, so it was gorgeous.
Do you happen to know what happened to Denny after?
I do. Denny worked at the store until it closed. I think it was in the early 90s when it closed down. And then he retired, and he'd actually bought a property just down Ioco Road, literally like maybe 5 houses from where our old house was. It's still there. It's kind of falling apart, but when Denny passed away a few years ago, he was still living in Ioco, and I think it was pneumonia. I'm not 100% sure, but I know he passed away.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's always sad to lose somebody who's had so much history with the township.
He was a pillar of the community. Like, all I remember too is he was the one that did all the meat orders for the Imperial Oil ships, so the Tofino and the Skeena and all the ones that came right into the inlet there. He would supply all the meat to them. He would deliver meat to all the women who couldn't come down because they had kids throughout the community. He would do anything for anybody. I just remember him always running around doing errands for people, and yeah.
So did you always live in Ioco, or did you move into Port Moody as well?
No, but most of my family, my aunts and uncles and everybody lived in Port Moody, so we always had the connections. I lived in Ioco, and then we moved up to Anmore when I was 6. Yeah.
So transportation to Ioco, how was that done?
The big bus. Public transit came right down to the corner, so we would do the loop around the old Bowling Green, and there's that bus stop still there. So that was how we got in and out for a long time until we got the second car. In Anmore, there was like 3 buses a day. You were either up at 6 a.m. or you worked, and home at midnight or you weren't. So transit's improved since I was a teenager as well. But yeah, the public transit came by and was always the bus driver, and sometimes he'd go to the store and stop at Denny's store for a drink or a popsicle too, and yeah.
So what about school?
For myself,
Yes.
I went to Anmore Elementary only because Ioco School was closing down at that time when I started school. So Anmore Elementary was where me and my brother and sister all went. Ioco School became almost like an alternative school for the Coquitlam School District, and I think it was called Shaft, is what I remember. I think we called it Shaft School, and it was for behavioral students. I ended up, when I became a teacher, I was able to TOC as a substitute there for 1 day, about 1 month before it was closed down permanently.
Oh, okay.
So I was able to get in and see it after all that time, because I don't want to be able to play on the grounds and roller skate in the parking lot and stuff. But yeah, so I never went to Ioco School, but my cousins did, my older cousins who lived up in Anmore at the time. And I know that lots of my grandma's friends and grandma's neighbors and all of those guys have stories of the Ioco town site too, and that school.
So what about entertainment in the small township of Ioco?
It was I would say there's about 40% of people were still living there when I was down there. But it was a very tight community. Like, everybody knew each other. Mm-hmm. When you walked around and picked your blackberries or you're picking apples, whatever the season was, you just knew every family by name. You would be welcomed in to have tea or coffee or iced tea on the patio. I remember there was a family called the Francises that were living up there, and they had a daughter a year younger than me, so we became really good friends and would run across the bridge to each other's houses. And they used to have like kind of potluck get-togethers sometimes. I remember having a couple potluck dinners just in the neighborhood, kind of like a big barbecue. But the community hall was the big one. So the community hall was where my parents had their wedding reception, where we had our elementary school Christmas plays. Anmore Elementary would come down every year and do a big Christmas play, probably till I was in about grade 6. And I think it shut down permanently around grade 6, grade 7. But yeah, it was kind of centered around that side, near the store and the community center, the hall, and then the families that were still on that side, and we'd kind of all come to them. But you could tell it was kind of quieting down at that point, and you'd hear stories about so-and-so who moved away, or so-and-so who moved out of town, or so yeah. Everybody knew each other. It was a very small, tight-knit community.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. Even when it was in its smaller state.
So how do you feel about the town site today?
I'm surprised that all the houses that are still there are so run down. I would like to see it as a heritage site. I know that there's that whole development proposal for part of it. I think that would actually be really sad because it's such a unique area in BC and Lower Mainland. I think it should be preserved. As a history teacher, I'm like, oh, keep it, preserve it. I would like to see it revitalized somehow. Almost like having the store almost open. Those buildings, if they could be restored somehow and have people be able to go in and see them, even if it was kind of a museum, or just to have something at the community hall again, or have the school open for something. Like, I just think it would be a waste and a shame to see that all just kind of fall apart and have the houses completely fall apart. I'd like to see it revitalized to some degree.
Well, hopefully that'll occur sometime in the future and
Yeah.
part of the new development that they're coming up with.
Yeah.
So tell me some more stories about living in
Ioco.
Ioco. Yeah.
There's so many. So, other than running back and forth to Denny's all the time for candy.
Seems to stand out in your mind.
Yeah, we would go, well, my aunt actually lived down on Beach Avenue, my aunt and uncle. So between our house and Beach Avenue, it was faster to take the railroad tracks. So the train would still come in to the docks at Ioco all the time. So we just knew that in the morning you couldn't do it like around, like you'd have to wait till after lunch, or anytime between 4:30 and 5:30 you couldn't be on the track. You'd be in a lot of trouble. So we knew what time we'd run down to my aunt's house to the beach. We grew up playing on the beach. My uncle had a huge dock where we had boats out there. We had our rebel boat. We were always out crabbing and fishing and running around. We'd have annual family baseball barbecues up at the field above the school there. And so it was always kind of neat because my dad played soccer. He was part of the Port Moody Soccer League for years and years and years before he passed away. And so he would play soccer there Thursday nights with his team, and then we'd have our barbecues with our family. Like, that was just another part of our backyard. I remember how many times we were in the town site picking blackberries, and I always wondered why my parents were on high alert. And I'm like, what are you looking for? And then the cougars would come by, or the black bears would walk by, and you're like, that's why. So the wildlife was definitely there. Going up, so the most horrible, I guess, nobody should do this at home, story was, remember my dad and I was probably about 5 or 6, and my dad and his 2 brothers, Bob and Pat, and my cousin Tim, and my grandfather and their father, Dennis, they all worked for Imperial Oil at one point. So my grandfather was the night security guard at the doors there right behind any store for the main entrance. And then all of my uncles, my dad and my cousin worked on the ships, the Tofino and the Skeena. So I remember one day both of my uncles were on the Skeena, and before they were about to head out, because we could always see them from the water when the ships would pull out, my dad's like, well, do you want to go say bye? I'm like, okay, I guess my dad forgot something. So instead of like driving and like going on like normal people, we took the rowboat and rowed up to the side, and I climbed up the little ladder. And I remember my dad getting in a little trouble because why are you bringing a 5-year-old girl at the side of a monster ship? But I'll never forget being on the boat and seeing all the stuff, and the captain took me around and showed me like the workout room and like the galley and all the little areas.
What a neat experience.
Totally.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend doing it today, but at the time it was amazing.
Well, your dad, did he work at Ioco, or?
He worked on the Skeena and the Tofino until I was about 1.5 years, and then because the shifts were a month on, a month off, he felt he was away from the family too much. So he ended up leaving and working for BC Hydro, became BC Gas, and now Fortis. But my Uncle Bob and my Uncle Pat stayed on until they retired. And then my cousin Tim ended up becoming a captain and working overseas on other ships for quite some time. And he now lives in PEI.
Somebody was telling me some story about I think it's the water taxi. Is there a story regarding the water taxi?
Water taxi station?
Yeah.
our old house.
Yeah. Yeah.
All we knew was that they would come from, like I said, downtown or northbound or wherever they would come, and there was a little dock somewhere. We never quite figured out where that dock was, but we knew it was down in between the Ioco boathouse that's there now and where we lived. And they would just apparently walk up the hill. We think it was closer to where the church is now.
Okay.
And that big monster house that's right down in the water. We think it was somewhere in there, and then they would walk up to the station there to get their tickets and wait, and then walk down when the boats came in.
Oh.
So we weren't sure exactly where the dock was, but we definitely knew that was our house. We had the little window and the old, the house is so old too, it had the old, like the propane had to be filled every week, the big propane tank out front. You had the old stove that had like that metal pieces that came off, you had to stoke the fire, it was crazy. Yeah, it's a neat old place.
Anything else you can think of?
I would just like to mention Denny and Evelyn at the store for all the work that they did. I know that Evelyn lived in the town site as well, but she was on the other side. And just the fact that Mrs. Ludlow was still living there is unbelievable to me. It is amazing, isn't it? Yeah, and some of the families that are still kind of associated with the area, like the Carlsons, or I think it was Denny. I think his name was Shirt. I can never know how to say his last name. And then the weirdest part of all of that was when I came to grade 12 at Port Moody Secondary. Miss McAuliffe was my English 12 teacher, and when she was asking where I lived and who I knew, and she was Evelyn's daughter. So I didn't realize I had Evelyn's daughter as my history or my English 12 teacher.
That's a small world.
Yeah, so that was kind of a neat full circle kind of thing.
But you brought photo albums and some photos in.
Yes.
I think what we'll do is take a break, bring them over, and
Perfect.
we'll talk about some of the pictures you've got in.
Sounds good.
What have you got for me?
Start. I guess you'd like to see the original station.
That would be wonderful.
So that's the water taxi station in the 1920s, and actually it used to just be this little part with the door, but my dad had built on the side part at that point.
Excellent.
So it was a lot smaller than that originally. And just a reference in the winter, that's kind of the corner by Beach Avenue. That today has the three big houses, but the little house, as we called it, back right onto that gully that's right.
So did you have some pretty severe winters while you were living there? You've got a lot of snow in this one.
I remember playing in the snow all the time. We have pictures of my dad pulling us down the hills, and like we had a huge driveway that went right down to the railroad, and so I was quite young. I don't remember, but I remember playing in the snow a lot more there than in recent memory.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
What else have you got for me?
So the Ioco Hall. This is one of the photos from my grade 5 class. It's me up front with the big skirt there. We were performing at the Ioco Hall for our Christmas play. So I want to say it had something to do with cultural themes, and we were all doing a Polish dance that year. So I remember being on stage, and there's a huge audience there, and they were filming it up from the balcony, and they had hot chocolate for us at the end out front, and yeah, it was
that's
pretty
great.
neat.
Kids look like they're having a good time.
Yeah, we had a lot of Christmas stuff down there. So this was just, I'm sure you guys may have seen this, but this is a postcard, but that was one of the, I believe that's Skina that my family used to work on. So that's just one of the boats that used to dock at the Ioco terminal there. And they would go up the coast to Alaska, the Panhandle, through Haida Gwaii and around the coast areas. I do have a photo that I believe my brother has of my dad standing on the top of that one, waving to everybody. So we're trying to find that one for you as well.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we're always looking for photos that have unique interest for the area. So that'd be great to get a hold of those.
This one I found quite unique. This is my Aunt Marie Carey. She married Ron Turbot, whose mother Dorothy lived in the town site. We used to call her Dot. And this was in 1947 when my Aunt Marie was crowned teen queen of Port Moody at a local event. So I thought that was interesting to share.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think she must have been
Love
maybe
the
15,
gown.
16. Yeah. I'm not sure how old, yeah. And then the album here, this is just, it's my parents' wedding album, but this was the inside of the church or the community hall. So the story I remember hearing from my dad was that they decided to have an open bar for the wedding, and all the alcohol came the night before, but they realized that no one was going to be there overnight. So my dad ended up sleeping on the top balcony part with all the alcohol in case any of his buddies found out there was booze in the building. So my dad was like, I was very tired. So, but that day they had the whole front here, so that would be the stage in the background, and then they had the dance floor and everything else. So their head table would be there, and then of course the whole family's.
I just wonder how many weddings they actually had in that area.
Oh yeah, apparently my mom had to book it in
Yeah.
like 6 to 8 months in
I can
advance.
well believe it, yeah.
Yeah, so there's just an album
Well
full
used.
of
Oh, that's
all
great.
photos. I also sent some photos to the museum from classes, like the class photos from the Ioco school from 1941 to 47 of all the class students.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, so my friend Karen Lawn, well, it's her maiden name is Karen Hansen now. We went to Anmore Elementary together, and her grandma actually grew up in Anmore, and she grew up in Anmore, so she actually went to Ioco school, so we have some photos for you as well there.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, I appreciate you bringing all this stuff in for us and the stories that you've given us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I truly appreciate being able to record some of this stuff so that we can have it for future generations.
Absolutely.
These stories get lost very quickly.
Oh yeah.
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 And that brings a community to life.
It does, and I think the stories, like some of the ones, like when my parents were growing up in Port Moody, and the pulp mill would have their big, whatever the flush of the system was, and all the dirt would come to the laundry in town, and my grandma having to air out all the extra, like all these little things about the area, I think just bring it to life because people forget that people have been here for a very long time. So,
Well, especially when you look at a place like Ioco, and it's a closed down community.
yeah,
You know, so we'd like to preserve as much of it as we can, certainly in the history.
I agree.
Thank you.
Let me know how I can help.
Thank you.
Thanks.